Hello, Patrick Johnson. Welcome to this new season of Canuckdom. I guess we're at the top of the slide, looking at that long grind of how many weeks, months, games, looking back fondly to the playoff run that we all experienced last year.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get for those of us for those of us for those of you who have watched our videos before. We will do these at least once a week, sometimes a little bit more, depending on the news run. And we will get to a full season preview formatted and everything right before the season. But right now, we're just going to talk about the preseason. So, Patrick, this is the first foray into the season that we've talked about this. Your impressions on how the offseason went for this team and whether you think they are better or not than they were when they were knocked out of the playoffs by the Oilers.
Well, I like your first of all your analogy of it. We're at the top of the slide because that's very all things are inevitable view of
I
the
guess I
world.
could have said we're at the bottom of the stairs, looking at a long climb, the old sort of snakes and ladders, where you're going up or going down. But I'll go with the analogy of the downward skate. It's like it's a ride. It doesn't
Yeah,
mean
well,
that
it's
it's
the
a bad.
Prez Belusky from The Wire who pointed out that no one wins, one team only loses more slowly. Anyway,
Our good friend Ed Willis has a great book out on the Canucks,
yeah,
and I thank you for a reference for a TV show that started more than 20 years ago. So
yes,
well
well,
done.
22, I believe 22 years ago. So,
Yeah.
um, anyway, yeah, off season's been really interesting. I really am impressed with the work they did up front. Added some interesting forwards. From sort of the wild card that is Daniel Sprong. Obviously, the goal he scored on Wednesday night in Abbotsford had everyone talking, but a player who is far from perfect. To the other end of the spectrum, a guy like Jake DeBrusk, who I think brings everything that Elias Pettersson really has been needing as a winger. That Andrei Kuzmenko clearly wasn't able to bring last year, and Ilya Mikheyev as well. A guy that has a strong two-way sense, but also can finish, and perhaps thinks the game closer to the level that Pettersson thinks. And it's not so much that that's a hard guy to play with; it's if you can find a guy that meshes, that's going to pay off and better than you could possibly have imagined or possibly hoped for. So. And Danton Heinen. Danton Heinen is we've written a lot about, maybe more than we should have, but still, I think he's an interesting player. Obviously, hometown connection, but just a guy that a smart two-way player. I think instinctually should fit with Miller and Besser. We'll see how that goes. And Kiefer Sherwood, who should help with penalty kill, fast player that I was really impressed with watching him up close in the series the Canucks had against Nashville. Forwards look great. I would say the question marks are obviously everywhere else. I would say an underwhelming offseason on the blue line. Re-signing Phil Hronek at a fantastic price, I think, given the skills he brings. A good partner for Quinn Hughes. Not perfect defensively, but does enough with the puck that I mostly don't worry about that. But the fact that the really the only guys they were able to bring in were Derek Forbort and Vinny Desharnais raised my eyebrows almost from the start. A couple of guys Forbort really has been a depth defenseman for several seasons now. A guy obviously I think who's been a smart, steady, dependable defenseman, but not terribly quick on his feet. And then Desharnais, who we saw a lot of last year with Edmonton, and a guy that I think got exposed a lot. A surprising acquisition from my standpoint. And then, of course, there's the Demko question. And a goal I don't think the Canucks are especially worried about to start with, but there are now concerns, I think, about sort of durability. This popliteus injury he's dealing with, which isn't substantial, but it's enough that it set back his recovery this summer. And he's not going to start the season almost certainly in game shape. I don't expect that he'll play in any of the next 4 games. 4 games to go when we're making this video. I don't think there's any sense he's going to be playing in any of those. So, and Kevin Lankinen was a last minute, but I think given circumstances, great addition. He's a dependable NHL goalie. He has experience. He showed well. He knows the goalie coach, Marco Terenius, quite well. It's a good fit. Also, in the cap world, a very cheap addition, no risk there at all. So to start the season with him and Artur Shilovs, I think they're feeling all right. I mean, obviously they'd like Demko to be in there, but it's an interesting team. And yeah, to go back to Ed Willis's book, Never Boring. I mean, this team continues to be never boring.
We are going to be running an excerpt, but yes, I would recommend people get this book. It's
next week.
Yeah, October 4th. So that weekend we'll be running an excerpt from it. Interesting, Patrick. I think that when you look at this team and what's happened in the offseason, I'll just play devil's advocate a little bit. I don't want to revisit the thank you Jim era, but before that bar was getting in the playoffs, right? I think this team showed last year how close they were to an Edmonton team that was very close to winning the cup. The expectation should be higher than just making the playoffs. So I ask you this, a concern at all that arguably their two best players who showed up for the playoffs, who were probably their two key players in those first two rounds, were just walked. I know there were offers made and there's limits and there's a salary cap to deal with, but are you concerned at all that whether it's grit, size, two-way ability, that you lost two of your better players in that playoff series? Because the other, Pettersson, Hughes, to varying degrees of success, they did look a little worn out, and you had these other guys step up. Are you concerned at all of the subtractions as much as you've talked about the additions?
Well, Lindholm was an interesting acquisition and brought not as much as I think they hoped he would, but still added to the roster. Rick talked to him on Wednesday. A lot of the talk has been about Aatu Rato Ato Ratu, and
Rati.
Even though he's a left-handed shot, he flips his stick over. He takes face-offs as a right-handed shot. Something they don't have a right shot center, and that's an interesting wrinkle that Ratu brings to the equation. Whether that means he makes the team out of training camp, I don't know. But Lindholm brought something they didn't have. He was very good on face-offs, right shot. Helped that PK. I think was starting to find his. Obviously, he did produce in the playoffs. Some of that I think was a bit of a mirage, but I think he had started to find his way by the end of the playoffs that this is what my role on the team is going to be. He was not an irreplaceable player by any stretch of the imagination, but he was a player with a lot of experience, quality player. So finding a way to replace him, they don't necessarily have anybody internally who steps up and said, this is the next Elias Lindholm. So that's one. I really enjoyed the Nikita Zadorov experience. But let's not forget, the player he was in the playoffs was not the player he'd been in the regular season. So the consistency question was always going to be there. I understand why the Canucks didn't go to the sort of contract demands he had and really held firm on that one. But he still was a fantastic skater, very mobile, obviously very physical, a player that neither Forbort nor Desharnais is. Desharnais is a physical defenseman, but he's not a great skater. And, for a team that's been so focused on being strong defensively, and that was so much of their story last year, the way that rotation is now changed back to be what it was before Zadorov. Let's not forget, the Canucks were playing well before they had Zadorov, but they didn't become as strong defensively as they proved to be until after he showed up. Now, he wasn't the reason why, but the skill set fit what they were trying to do, like I said, much better than I think Forbort or Desharnais do at the moment.
One other thing that obviously was a trip in the playoffs, and I think the fun thing about this situation, Patrick, where the team is now, I think you look at, again, it's not about making the playoffs. It's like, how do we get past Colorado? How do we get past Vegas? How do we get past Edmonton ultimately? Right. And let's face it, that Oilers power play is very unique. Mm-hmm. Special teams are going to be a massive part of truly contending for a cup. How do you feel they've addressed perhaps some of their deficiencies last year? Is there still a lot of work to do? Do you feel like there's a coaching element that can make those changes? Is it personnel? How do you feel about the power play and the penalty kill?
Well, the power play should be better, right? Look at the components involved. To me, a lot of it comes back to Elias Pettersson, who obviously struggled down the stretch. I don't think it's any coincidence that the power play began to struggle once he started struggling. He lacked confidence in finishing. He lacked confidence on the puck. Obviously it's a fresh season, fresh start, all that. There's no reason to think he won't get back to the player he was. Let's not forget, I've said this many times, he was the NHL first star of the month in January, right? Like he had a dominant performance on that month opening road trip where they beat everybody back east, all these strong teams. They beat the Rangers in New York. Like, he was outstanding on that road trip. And then I guess his knees started bugging him. I think he felt frustrated by his line mates. And it just kind of snowballed. And he never really faced consistent frustration like that before in his career. His career has been nothing but highs. And so, it was, I think, a mental challenge. And by all accounts, he's coming fresh and excited and, obviously has his new contract. And he's a player who plays to win. So, to me, that's the big factor on the power play. The penalty kill did improve as the season went along. And this is the real test now for Adam Foote, who, let's not forget, last year was his first full-time season as an NHL coach. And as really only his, second full season as a coach. He coached his kids' teams in elite minor hockey in Colorado. He'd been a development coach with the Avalanche. But really, as a guy dealing with players on a daily basis, thinking about how he wants his team to play, planning for all that, he was very inexperienced coming into last season. He had half a season with Rick Tocchet as an NHL coach. But Tocchet, when I asked him mid-season, how far is he coming? I mean, this was last December, right? Like, he's only he's less than a year into his time as an NHL coach. And I asked Tocchet how far he'd come. He said 1,000,000%. And as the season progressed, you could see, clearly the way, Tocchet would tell us, like, the preparation levels that Foote brought to the table was outstanding. Like, the guy learned on his feet very quickly. But
and he was dealing with a serious personal issue last year.
Yeah, right.
Situation with his son, obviously,
to
for
be clear,
World Juniors.
Stressful situation. Anyway, he succeeded as a coach in his first season. But now the challenge is, what do you do in the second edition of that? And he's heavily involved. He's running the penalty kill, right? Like, that's his task, and he's now doing it without a net. Like, Mike Yeo is not there, and it's the weight is on him. So the special teams is essential. Like, no good team gets anywhere without good special teams. The great teams have great special teams. Yeah. So that among many things is a big question mark for this team. They have every reason to think they can get it done. They have good personnel. Like, Teddy Blueger's fantastic penalty killer. Tyler Myers really emerged last year as a strong penalty killer. Can Forbort have an impact? Can Darren A have an impact there? Sherwood is being looked towards. Obviously, Dakota Joshua's out injured or out with cancer. So whenever he gets back, he'll help out, but he's not there to start with. There's a lot of sort of expectation on those special teams, and that where those teams go will tell us a lot about where this team goes in general.
And of course, the hockey cliche, you brought him up earlier. Your goalie is your best penalty killer. So we'll see what happens with them. Exactly. But that's a story for another day. So thanks for that, Patrick. It's a good overview of where we are in the preseason. Coming up to the regular season, we'll have all sorts of content for you. Go to theprovince.com, vancouversun.com. You'll get all of Patrick's stories, all of Ben Kuzma's stories. A renewed focus for our other guys, Steve Ewan and JJ Adams, that will include some hockey this year. We do have this excerpt from Ed Willis's book, Never Boring, coming up on the weekend of the 5th and 6th, I believe. You can get that on our website and in the print edition. So We will do these every week. I know this appears in multiple formats on YouTube, on our website. Leave comments, send us questions, track us down. We're going to be very much more interactive this year. What you want to know about the Canucks, Patrick will answer. So thanks for watching, everyone. We will talk to you soon.